Hey, Jody here. Today we're with JD Brewer again in his fab shop and then also on the job site. So today we're going to show a little bit of welding base plates on columns that will be upright columns for a mezzanine. And then we'll also walk you through the whole mezzanine build. Not in detail, but just so you can get an idea of what a welder goes through. If you're a welding student or maybe you're in the process of deciding if you want to be a welder, it's a good little heads up sampling of what you might go through. So a lot of times it's not just welding. In this video, you're going to see a little bit of cutting metal, welding metal, but then also hauling metal, hanging chain falls, pulling on come-alongs, cutting, grinding, up and down ladders, that sort of thing. And that's pretty normal stuff. So today is a day in the life, JD Brewer, building a mezzanine. Let's do it. These are the base plates that are going to go on the columns for the mezzanine. It's 3/4 inch steel with holes drilled them for mounting bolts. 10-inch total diameter, and we're welding it to 6-inch box tubing. Now I want to talk a little bit about this little fixture, just a little DIY fixture, but JD works alone a lot, and so he needs something to help him hold that flange on this box tubing while he gets a tack weld on it. Now JD builds a lot of mezzanines, so he's done this operation many times, and when you're doing something a lot of times, it warrants stopping and making a fixture so you don't have to wrestle and hold something. So let me just go over the components here. On the top there's a lip, so he can just hang it on the box tubing and it won't go anywhere while he does something else. You got 2-inch spacers on the bottom and on the upright because it's 6-inch tubing and a 10-inch floor flange, so that spaces it evenly. And then a bottom lip to hold the heavy flange. That's base plate. I don't know how much it weighs, but it's 3/4 plate, 10 inches by 10 inches. So when he gets this thing clamped from the bottom, he'll be able, well, you'll see. That just lets him very easily rest the floor plate, the floor flange, or the base plate, whatever you want to call it, right where it needs to be.
See how square didn't hit here, I tack it here, and I can pull that side out. No big deal.
Lets him hold it up there and get a tack on it, and then he can work from there. He's got one tack on it now. I'm going to do a little squaring up, and that's generally the way it works. Using dual shield flux core 71M 045. These are the settings. Roughly 25 volts, 310 inches per minute using 045. That's 1.1 millimeter 71M wire. And it takes a surprisingly short amount of time to complete one of these welds. Dual shield flux core is a nice hot process. It's a tried and true process, unlikely to get lack of fusion unless you just go out of scope with your parameters. You can push a little bit or you can use a little pull angle. Both seem to work out just fine. And I would say at those settings it's comparable to about a 5/32 7018 rod if you were stick welding. We're on site now. All right, so these are the uprights, all primered. And I've got it in super fast motion here, otherwise it would be a 3-hour video. Now, this particular facility is a blow molding facility that makes all kind of plastic bottles and things like milk jugs and whatnot. So that's the reason for JD having to wear the beard net inside there. You might notice the only two people you see working in this video are on the mezzanine. That is, are JD and his helper Wyatt. That's because that's the only two people on the crew. That's typical. Just him and a helper putting up a mezzanine. So you got to work smart, use forklifts and come-alongs, chain falls, and know what you're doing. I'm going to go ahead and call out here that JD is doing a little bit of tack welding in short sleeves. I know a lot of students watch these videos, a lot of instructors show them to their students, so this is one of those things you're going to have to pay attention to when you're on a job site. Probably going to be required to wear long sleeves, even for short tacks. I don't think the risk is very big there for a quick tack or two, but rules are rules. Be safe out there. He brought the Lincoln Power MIG 256 on site here for doing the welds that he could reach with it. Later on in the video, you're going to see when he's on top of the mezzanine, just because it'd be difficult to lift it up there with a forklift and tie up a forklift or something like that. He's going to switch over to 210 MP, a much smaller welder. Still running the dual shield flux core. These little dollies are super handy for transporting material like this inside and outside of this building. Little final trimming with the grinder for fit up. Now the decking is on, ready to put the grading material on. Now I'm going to take a break right here real quick because I noticed that DeWalt box. And when I was at JD's shop the other day, I got him to show it to me real quick. Again, I got nothing to do with DeWalt, but I thought you'd be interested in seeing the stuff he carries on the job site with him. In the bottom drawer here, it's odd to think that you could put a welder in the small drawer of a toolbox like this, but that's a 160 amp TIG inverter, some cutting disc, and a 6-inch Metabo in the bottom there, and then all kinds of cutting discs and torpedo levels and whatnot in the top.
That could fit in the back of my truck, you know, in between my seats.
Yeah.
Keep it in there.
All right, back to the mezz. A little more cutting with the 6-inch grinder. I timed this when I was editing it. It's a very easy way to time stuff. Actual cut time for one of these cuts of the sections of grading is almost 2.5 minutes. A plasma cutter would probably beat that time, but when you're going on site like this, the plasma cutter can be kind of tricky. You got to depend on having good high pressure dry air, a good power source, and all that stuff, and it's just, you know, harder to carry and stretch air hoses and all that stuff, whereas a 6-inch grinder with cutting discs may take just a little bit longer per cut, but it's a whole lot easier to carry on site. That's what JD does anyway. Hey, I want to take a minute and tell you about a project I've been working on. It's a podcast. It's a weekly welding podcast where we get together, we talk about welding topics like how to price welding jobs or welding safety issues. And every other week we have a guest on, and we interview a guest with a certain skill set. It's been really interesting for me. Like so far we've had Isaac Carrion, who's a rig welder out in Texas. He does heavy equipment repair. We've had Joel Bushman, who builds chassis for monster trucks. And the cool thing about it is it's just a free sharing of information. A lot of times you don't have to ask an expert, or you don't have to be an expert to help somebody. You just have to be a 5th grader willing to help a 4th grader. And what's cool about it is that I find myself in the 4th grader slot a lot of times. And I'm learning a lot. I'm having a good time. If you're all in and you can't get enough, you want to learn all you can about welding, Welding Tips and Tricks podcast. You can find it on iTunes. It's on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and a few other places. Take a listen. I think you'll enjoy it. See you next time.